Jenny, we're going to do another astrobiography today.
Nice.
Who do you want to talk about?
We're going to talk about Britney Spears today.
Britney Spears. So what
Yeah.
do we know about Britney Spears before we ever look at her chart? What do you know about her?
Well, first of all, she's in the news right now. So that's
Yeah.
part of the reason we've been picking her. She's been in court this week, and she has been in court to fight against the conservatorship that is basically controlling her whole life. So that's the 2-second version. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But she's a pop star. She's born in the early 80s and was very well known for quite a few years, making her own videos. Was both sort of like the cute younger girl, and then also was very sexual and came under all sorts of scrutiny and bashing for those things.
Yeah, she was fine as long as she was a cute little girl. I mean, she started out, what was that show she was on at the very beginning when she was like 9 or 10 years old? And she was incredible. She really, I mean, right from the time she was a child, this woman really did have something. So the movie, the documentary that you and I both watched was on Hulu, and it's called, what is it again?
It's called Framing Britney Spears.
It's
brand new.
Spears. Yeah, it's brand new. So there's other documentaries and things I'm sure you can find if you want more information about her, but that's a good place to start. And without further ado, you want to open up that chart?
Sure. Let's open it up here. And here we go. Yeah, I do want to say one other thing about the documentary too. And you watch it, it's not very long. It's a little bit over an hour. And it doesn't have a whole lot of personal footage from Britney or her family. They are not involved in the making of it. It's more of an outward portrayal of what's been going on in the news. So yeah, just wanted to say that because it's an interesting piece. So, All right, Britney,
here she is. And, the first thing I'm going to notice, and this is really interesting, but the first thing that jumps out at me is that basically everything in this chart is below the horizon. It's a nighttime chart, which, as you mentioned when we were talking earlier, that puts Venus in a more positive position. And it puts Saturn as the most difficult planet in the chart. And I know I'm about to get way ahead of myself, so let's pull back and just look at some of the core basics.
Yeah,
she's
sounds
got
good.
That Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Aquarius, Libra rising. What does just those 3 things tell us about her?
I would probably start with the Aquarius moon there. The need to be socially significant. There's a sort of an unusualness. It's really easy for someone with a moon in Aquarius to exhibit signs of detachment, of kind of getting away from some of the more emotional craziness. That's an interesting thing to think about. And it also can be a sign of someone who feels kind of alienated from the crowd. And some of the concerns of that Aquarius moon and also the Sagittarius sun is freedom, the ability to just be who she wants to be.
Yes, there's not a lot of space for someone with a Sagittarius sun and an Aquarius moon to be held down or held back or controlled. And, one of the other things I want to just mention with that Aquarius moon is it's in the 5th house of creativity. So that's, her need to be socially significant with her creativity is very important. And then we go right from thinking about those 2, the Sagittarius sun, the Aquarius moon, and we look at that Libra rising, which is ruled by Venus. That's, I always think, one of the things I always think of, and this comes from many years back, people with Libra rising, I always think that they are almost always a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for. Libra kind of makes things look a certain way, but never forget that Libra is an air sign, and there's a lot more intellectual going on in this person than what you initially see on the surface, which I think is really evident with her. I mean, she kind of showed up like she's this pretty little girl dancing and singing, but underneath that, she was a powerful force in her work. She wasn't just doing what other people told her to do.
Yeah, she was doing all the work really and figuring it all out as a pretty young person, even age 15, 16, 17. She was in charge of everything that she was doing. So yeah, it's potent, it's powerful. It speaks to the cardinal nature of that Libra, that it is able to get things started.
Okay.
So and also with I would say with the ascendant too, I mean, it's at 2, almost 3 degrees of Libra. So that's the place she's going to show up. That's the Aries point, just outside of the Aries point, that prominent position. And then also just having Saturn and Pluto in the first house. That's quite a statement. Those two right next to each other.
Yeah, that is quite a statement. And, you know, if you immediately look to the Venus, which we've mentioned a few times here already, in that because it's a night chart, it's supposed to be the most advantageous planet, and it rules the ascendant. So let's look at the condition of Venus in this chart, because I think it's the most important thing to see in this chart is that Venus. First of all, it's in Capricorn. What's that going to tell us? She values hard work. She values she values serious, hard effort, right? What else would you say just about Venus in Capricorn?
It's not the easiest placement as far as like relationships either. It brings in, there's a sense of a difficulty there. So I don't think it's the easiest in that way. Also, it's in the 4th house. So now you've got to add to your idea of hard work and perhaps some difficulty to the family story, her family life and her family origins, which I think there isn't a whole lot talked about. As Laurie and I were mentioning, that there isn't, at least not that I'm aware of, information about her childhood, but we're guessing based on her astrology, it was pretty rough. Things are not going well. It's definitely a sense of something really heavy-handed, possibly some abuse. Happening.
There's definitely, when I see just all of that below the horizon and that Venus ruling the chart, forming a square aspect to both Saturn and Pluto, there's something in that early childhood that was extremely difficult. And I haven't watched other documentaries or read a lot of other stuff, but what I have seen and read, I haven't seen any of that brought up. But I think there was something dark in that child, for sure.
Yeah, and also, I was just going to mention Venus being right next to the South Node. I mean, even if you don't know much about the nodal axis, which is okay, what you can think of that is just, I was thinking of the keyword regressive behavior. Like what sense of like regressive things came back that were difficult, that also created a sense of difficulty in relationship. And then when you add it, squaring Saturn and squaring Pluto, then you're going, there's really some difficulty tied in with relationships here. It really elevates that.
And if you are looking at astrology from the perspective of the ideas of reincarnation or past lives, this would really suggest that it's not just from the family of this lifetime, but a lot of difficulties being brought into the life that this is reflecting.
I mean, just think about the implications of, so Venus being the ruler of her chart and having this much developmental tension placed on it. And also take your eye up to the other house that Venus rules, which is the 8th house of other people's baggage, like stuff that's kind of hidden in the shadows, kind of below the surface. And then she also has Chiron, the wounded healer, in the 8th house. So there's also that element of, this is part of her path that she's having to struggle with.
Right. The wound from other people's baggage, other people's values. And, you think about the 8th house, there's layers and layers of meaning to all of these things, but the 8th house is also, it's shared resources, shared money, and this whole issue of her fortune and how it's being controlled by others.
Yeah. So that's actually the the astrology here really makes that statement of Saturn squaring Venus and ruling the 8th house. If you're saying that in non-astrology language, you're saying the father,
Right.
controlling the daughter to control her money, and that this is a soul wound that for her is part of the major course of her life, that she has to do battle with this and work to
And
heal it.
yeah, and like you said, when we were talking earlier, this is just a story of misogyny. This would never have happened. This situation that she finds herself in today would never happen to a man in our culture. And yeah, she went through a hard time. She had some public temper tantrums, and yeah,
Yeah.
it would never have happened if she was not a female.
And to think about like any other male stars that have like had major public breakdowns, and I'm not going to name any names because that's not what this is about, but just there's many of them, and they don't get their fortunes taken away. They don't have their fathers coming in and taking away their stuff. And I think Britney Spears in many, many ways is sort of a poster child of this type of misogyny from a very early age. Every time she gets interviewed in this documentary, it's always asking about her body, her boobs, or this or that. It's never ever talking about her talent or where she came up with the wherewithal to do the things she was doing, or anything about her voice, which is she actually has a really great voice. It was really interesting, and terrible. Like this is the reality. So Laurie and I are both hoping that Britney will continue to be a poster child in another way and break free of this stuff.
I mean, yeah, I feel very hopeful, really, because she is a strong, powerful woman, and she does have a huge following of people. Hashtag free Britney. She's got a huge support to overcome this situation that she's in. And when you look at that Venus being squared by all three of those planets, the exact perfect square is Pluto. And I feel like, this is so much what she's here to do, is to transform that. It's like she came into her career as the cute little girl singing and dancing. And it was when the sexuality started coming in that people started trying to put some controls on her. Again, Pluto squaring that Venus. The controls started coming down. She's a woman. How dare she? Yeah. So the other side of Pluto, and the other side of a square, the purpose of a square is to push us to do the hard work necessary. And Pluto's job is to destroy what is in the way of necessary transformation. This Venus has to be transformed, bottom line. And on the other side of the transformation is the empowerment of Pluto. So once she can do the work, fully the work, and transform how she's seen and how other people are controlling her, those two houses that Venus rules, then empowerment comes in its place. So,
nice, Laurie. Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice statement.
I think it's really important to not look at this and go, oh, she has this awful suffering. Well, yeah, she's been through a friggin' lot. But there is the work involved that creates the space for the transformation.
Yeah, and some of the other things that support that. So, Laurie really talking about the difficulty and the struggle. But then in some of the kind of helpers in her chart is that she does have really nice aspects to the moon.
Yeah.
The moon trines that Saturn. So there is some sense of Saturn providing some support and stability in that. So that's helpful. And also, the sun and the moon sextile, so they support each other quite well too. So that's a nice, just having that fire sun and air moon, that's a nice support too.
Yes.
So those are some sort of,
that is so important also, because that rules, the moon rules her midheaven and her north node. That's the motion forward in the life, is to bring it up, bring this darkness up into the light.
Yeah. So
It's like
Yep.
once that transformation of that family pattern, then she can move into really opening her heart in a public way.
Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a couple other things in this chart too that I think lend themselves. She's got Mars square Neptune. That is a very charismatic statement
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
It's also presents a challenge in the form of like kind of having to fight through some confusion and some kind of waterlogged feelings to take action, especially with Mars being in the 12th house. So it might take some time. That's kind of how I read on that. It's taken some time to kind of work through some of that. And that's also being activated right now by Neptune. Neptune's opposing
Oh
Mars
yeah,
right now in
Neptune's opposing
transit.
Mars.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't know if that's, I was just thinking about that playing into the story a little bit. Like there's some way that she's showing up. I mean, Neptune also refers to kind of Hollywood and the media. So she's
Right.
showing up right now
Right.
again for
Yeah.
this story.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing, thinking about transits, the thing that
Yeah.
I'm going to make all this go away. Okay. The thing that's going on right now that I think is just, I mean, here she is. She's suddenly in the news. Every day you're hearing stuff about what's going on with that conservatorship. But right now, Saturn is conjuncting her moon and Uranus is squaring her moon. So she is very public with the moon ruling the North Node and the midheaven. This is very, she's just in a bit of a pressure cooker that's very public right
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah. So I hope, take a look at that documentary. It'll explain more about kind of the whole story with her, where she's basically just been in this kind of oppressive conservatorship for, I think it's like 12 years now.
13 years, I think.
13 years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a crazy story, and it's a story of just like, how did this happen and what's really going on? And there's very little real media about what's happening. But it does seem like she's really lost the possession of herself in a lot of ways, not to mention her fortune and everything else. So
Yeah, I mean, she talked about in court the other day, she talked about just how not only her money is being controlled, but she's been forced to do performances. She's been forced to keep an IUD in because they don't want her having more children. All this medical stuff. She has no control over her own body right now, and she's going to break free of that. I believe she is. I believe that Uranus squaring that moon is going to wake her up to what she means to the public and how her breaking free is not just about her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything's below the horizon. She's got this inner stuff that she has to work on, but the purpose is to bring that awareness to the public. And there's so many, nobody even heard of conservatorships, I don't think.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that are probably under these kinds of rules that it's not even known about. So hopefully this is really bringing a lot of awareness, not just to Britney and her situation, but to a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a public expose on this type of oppression that we think doesn't exist in this country, and actually exists in a lot of ways. And it's time to we're trying to tear the covers off some of this. Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So I'm ready to wrap up. Are you? Okay, so hashtag free Britney, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
I know.
I look forward to seeing how it plays out over time, and I'm hopeful.
Yes, thanks, Laurie. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you. And you can find Jennie at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolore.org. And please join my Patreon and support us to keep doing these videos. Thank you all.
Nice. Thank you.